It was midnight, and Hannah's birthday party was moving fast. Under a large tent set up in the garden of the house, his friends were sitting at tables decorated with candlesticks, a witch's hat, and skeletal figures. Hannah and her friends had watched horror movies and told ghost stories, but that was just the beginning. Those who attended the party found out that a terrible maze had been set up in the dark garden. This labyrinth was built on top of an old cemetery, and according to the story, spirits wandered there. The brave ones agreed to enter the maze. Those who stepped into the labyrinth slowly sank into the darkness. Lanterns, pumpkin lanterns, and hidden speakers created an atmosphere in which visitors suddenly heard screaming ghosts, buzzing wind, and the sound of breaking ribs. The friends disappeared into the maze, screaming with fear. Hannah was driving along with one of her friends when they found a tombstone. There was a year on the tombstone with Hannah's name on it. At that moment, they were breathless and filled with fear. They began to think it was a good joke, but realized that this year marked a date exactly 100 years before Hannah's birthday. Suddenly, there was another scream coming from the labyrinth. Hannah and her friend quickly decided to turn back, but realized that her path was lost in the maze. Running in a panic, in an instant, Hannah's friend disappeared. Hannah continued to wander through the maze alone. At the end of the maze, he stopped in front of a tomb. The tombstone bore Hannah's own date of birth, and a ghost standing right next to the grave was approaching her. The ghost said to her, "Welcome back, Hannah. I've waited 100 years," he said. Hannah let out a scream that was in terror, but it was just a horror story. Her friends were waiting for her at the end of the maze to celebrate Hannah's birthday. However, they really enjoyed telling a terrible story, and Hannah's birthday party became an unforgettable experience. One evening on November Tom's 30th, his friends gathered at his house to celebrate his birthday. The atmosphere of the house was enthusiastically decorated with birthday decorations and candles. But later in the night, the partygoers noticed that strange things began to happen between them. The first strange incident began when the cake on the party table suddenly went out. The candles all went out one by one, causing the darkness of the room. Tom's friends, laughing, tried to light the cake again, but at the same time everyone's mobile phones also suddenly lost signal. This sudden darkness caused the guests to shudder, but that was just the beginning. There were urban legends about the mysterious past of Tom's house, and several people began to claim that these events were related to his house. While the party attendees were filled with fear, they began to feel that something had entered the house and was leaking through the walls. Startled screams and the striking sounds of stairs caused the crowd to panic. No one could figure out why this was happening, and Tom's friends tried to stay safe by hugging each other. That night, a fearful escape and mysterious events were not interrupted in a decadent sequence. Some of the guests who disappeared inside the house could not return, and at the end of the party, there was a difference between the number of people who entered the house and those who decamped. No one ever saw their missing friends again. At the first light of day, those attending the party fled the house in panic and reported the situation to the police. However, when they returned home, Tom's house was empty. and there was no evidence about the events that took place inside. Everything had disappeared. Only the unforgettable memories of fear and horror had been left behind. Tom's house became a neighborhood legend after that day, and no one knew what really happened that night. The disappearance of the birthday party guests was remembered by many as an unusual and creepy event, and Tom's house was now considered a place of ghosts. Daisy, 25. He invited his close friends and family to his house to celebrate his birthday. The party was to take place in the magnificent garden of an old manor house. Located on the edge of the forest, everything seemed perfect. Colorful balloons, candlesticks, and live music. However, the party that started off beautifully turned into a terrible dream as the evening progressed. Daisy and her friends slowly began to realize this strange fact. There were no clocks or clock signs in the garden, and the forest around them was covered with a creepy silence. In the middle of the party, a strange woman appeared. Her clothes were old-fashioned, and her eyes were of a dazzling green color. The woman walked towards Daisy, smiling and saying, "Daughter, I got lost here a long time ago. Can you help me?" said. Daisy and her friends looked scared. Because the woman had completely disappeared, they continued the party in a fearful silence. But from that moment, strange things began to happen. Strange incidents began to increase among the guests. Deck items suddenly disappear. Sounds were coming from the environment, but the source could not be found. And then, strange reflections and ghostly figures began to appear. Everyone was now beginning to believe that the strange woman who had come to the party had cursed the house. As it was approaching midnight, Daisy and her friends fled into the house in a panic. They locked the doors and closed the windows, but this could not prevent the situation. They realized that they had entered someone's dreams in a bad way and started living there. Nightmares. When the sun rose in the morning, the dreams and ghostly events inside the house ended. But Daisy and her friends never found anyone again outside. The cars and personal belongings of everyone who attended the party were in their places, but the people themselves had disappeared. Daisy and her friends left the mansion after that day, but the fate of those who attended the party was still a mystery. Everyone wanted to forget the scary experiences they had on the night of the party, but this event still remained in the memory as a horror story that was talked about and told. When Annie turned 18, her family and friends decided to organize a big surprise birthday party for her. The party was to be held at an old farmhouse. The house was in the forest outside the town and had been abandoned for years. Annie's birthday was seen as an opportunity to deconstruct the family's farmhouse and keep it together. When the day of the party came, the farmhouse was decorated with colorful balloons, lighting, and party decorations. Annie, her friends, and family were enjoying the farmhouse, as were the enthusiastic welcome of those attending the party. But as the night progressed, things started to get weird. First, they noticed that there was a mystery guest among those who attended the party. This person was walking around in a mask and in silence. Even Annie's closest friends didn't know who she was. The presence of this masked stranger gave a strange air to the party. In fear, Annie and her friends began to make their way through the dark corridors of the house, chasing after the masked stranger, but his trail was lost, and they disappeared within the house. The corridors were filled with strange symbols and secret room doors. The closing doors were trapping them inside, and the corridors were suddenly changing. Suddenly, one of the band members disappeared. The others panicked and tried to find him, but failed in the end. All that's left is Annie and her best friend. Both of them continued to wander around the house. In anxiety and fear, eventually they found the masked stranger in one of the rooms. But that moment turned into a real horror. When the masked stranger took off his mask, his face was exactly the same as Annie's. Tension increased between Annie and the masked stranger, and then the masked stranger approached. Annie said, "You have to save this farmhouse from me," and decamped in an instant. Annie and her friend ran away from home after their terrible experiences that night and reported the situation to the police. But when the authorities arrived at the house, the farmhouse was empty and no one was there. Annie did not know where the party members were, and the farmhouse was never abandoned again after that day. The events were still unsolved and remain the biggest secret of the town.